afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolene Whitney. The final gavel has come down on the 2024 Vermont legislative session. Some bills are still playing the waiting game while others seemingly sailed through. Meanwhile, the work of Vermont farmers continues. To talk about how issues impacting agriculture fared in the Statehouse this past session, we've invited Secretary of Vermont's Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Anson Tebbetts, to join us. Welcome back.
Good afternoon. Great to be here.
We're happy to have you. Secretary Tebbetts, one of the issues that was kind of big this year was the Fair Repair Act. Can you tell me about what this bill is and what the impact on farmers is?
Well, that was a bill that's been in play for a couple of sessions, and there's been a lot of discussion across the United States about it. That bill did not make it through the final gavel. So next year, I'm sure it will be back. Essentially, what it would give the right to repair. Farmers could repair their own equipment without having to necessarily go through a dealer. So there's lots of issues about privacy and protected patents and that kind of thing. So we'll see how it goes, but there was discussion. We didn't have a lot in the Agriculture Committee. I think the Commerce Committee took a lot of testimony on this, but the House and Senate eventually could not come to an agreement on what the bill would look like. So as they say, this one died for the session, and they'll have to start again with a new legislative session next year.
Were there any bills that you guys are hoping are going to pass?
Well, we had some bills that were important to the economy. We have one that's it's called a chicken parts bill, believe it or not, where they beat folks where you can now don't have to sell a whole bird under inspection. It can be divided up into parts. So I think that will be great for some of our small farmers. Working lands was again fully funded that we requested in the budget, and those are grants that are given to farmers. We just recently announced about $2.3 million worth of grants that went out there. We've had a lot of programs for maple, meat, and produce. They're working their way through the system now that were passed last year. So the economic development. This year the budget was a little bit tighter. Things have slowed down. The administration and all of us are trying to limit new taxes, new fees, and new regulations. So for the most part, we kept those at bay, and affordability is really important, especially in our farm community. Our farmers have tremendous amounts of land, and they use a tremendous amount of inputs to produce the food that we all enjoy.
And to kind of build off of one of the things you mentioned, the dairy community, there are around 484, as of the Vermont dairy updates done by UVM Extension, there were 484 dairy farms in Vermont operating this year, and that of those, about 123 are organic. And it seems like since 2020, Vermont has lost about 80 dairy farms a year. Is this a trend that should be concerning? Is this just a sign of the times?
Well, it's always concerning. We're doing our best to support our dairy farmers. The dairy industry is vital to the future of Vermont, especially our rural economies. Thousands of jobs are connected to dairy. They're keeping our land open and productive. Unfortunately, many of our dairy farmers are tied to a federal milk pricing system. There is some hope in the Farm Bill that pricing system will be adapted and changed, or USDA will do it itself. It's a slow, painful process that's happening. We do have the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, and that is supporting processors, also supporting farmers, whether they be cow, dairy, or goat, sheep, all of those. So those programs are going. USDA recently released the census for Vermont, and we have probably about 7,000 total farmers according to the census, and we lost about 4% of those in a 5-year period, and the national average is about 8%. Lots of things are changing on the landscape for farming, and that includes dairy.
Absolutely. It sounds almost like Vermont's holding on a little better than some other states.
Yeah, we're doing okay. And Vermont is a very important state for New England. Our big markets are New York and Massachusetts. A lot of our milk and dairy goes out of state, so they rely on the milk and the cheese. Across the United States, we are consuming more dairy than we ever have. We may not be drinking it as much. But we are, on average, the average American consumes about 40 pounds of cheese per year. So that's just an average. So people are enjoying butter's having a moment again. People are loving butter for cooking, baking, putting on their toast. We've got some amazing butter producers in Vermont, Cabot, Vermont Creamery, and some smaller ones that are doing amazing work on that as well. So dairies, as always, it needs to be supported, and we are so grateful for what our dairy farmers are doing to feed us.
Absolutely. Always a reminder to eat your cheese.
Absolutely. You can never have enough cheese in your life.
And one more issue around farming right now, people might have seen in the headlines. It seems like there's been an avian flu outbreak in cows, maybe a little bit more towards the south, but is that something that's on the mind of Vermont farmers that we should keep an eye on?
Absolutely. It's really consumed our veterinarians and our dairy division, making sure that protecting that it does not come here. It started in Texas, and it's been in New Mexico, it's been in Michigan. We've had 2 farm workers across the country that did come down with it. It's people recover from it, the cows recover from it, but it can have an economic impact on the farm. One thing that we're keeping an eye on, it's show season, where there's going to be a lot of 4-H shows, there's going to be a lot of dairy shows. And there's a lot of standards and regulations that USDA has put forward. So anyone that's thinking about, showing a lactating cow this year should really, check with their fair association or the local fair, or check with the Agency of Agriculture about some of the changes that may be required. A lot of testing is going on if you're moving between states with lactating cows. But it's something that it's just another thing that our dairy industry is having to deal with. The milk is safe. There's been no issues with the milk. Pasteurization is still doing wonders to make sure that the milk supply is safe.
All right, and let's move on to talk a little bit about flooding. Obviously, this year is just beginning, but last year so many farmers or their land was devastated from the floods. How did this session, how has the Agency of Ag continued to help farmers who were impacted by the flooding?
Well, you're absolutely right. The anniversary is coming up in July of the devastating flood across Vermont. We did issue some grants in the fall to the dairy community. I think it was about $3.6 million went to those that were severely impacted. I think there was about 133 farmers that received some money. We had a task force that was put together, and they'll be issuing their final report by the anniversary. And it's looking everything from how do we adapt to severe weather? How do we change some of the things that we're doing to protect us from these wild weather swings that we have? And that includes looking to Washington for programs, insurance programs. It may involve looking at the riverbeds, the corridors, to see what's happening there and to protect our farmland. And there's been a number of people that have stood up and helped with private donations. There's something called Dig Deep Vermont, and they've issued grants, micro grants to farmers. And we're so grateful for the Ski Area Association, the credit unions, the Farm Bureau. The agency is a partner, and just private people stepping forward and giving their hard-earned dollars, so those dollars can be going back out to the farmers to help people try to recover. So far, so good on the weather. The month of May, I think, everyone is pleased with the month of May. We didn't have a hard frost like we did last year. I think we've had just enough rain. We've had some warmth. We've had some sun, and I know a lot of our farmers have been working and gotten crops in already. Haying has been done. The corn looks good. So our fingers crossed that will continue through the summer, so people can just have a regular old boring Vermont summer, as we like to say.
Nice, a boring but hopefully productive Vermont
Absolutely.
summer. And we're coming into the summer, as you just mentioned, and one of the things that a lot of Vermont farmers participate in is the Summer Fancy Food Show coming up in New York City. Can you tell me about how the Agency of Agriculture supports farmers maybe showing their wares outside of the state?
Absolutely. This is a major show in New York City. It's at the Javits Center there. And from around the world, people come, and buyers come to the booth and say, boy, that looks good, and they have samples. We will have a Vermont pavilion this year. It's in late June, and we'll have people there, maybe selling cheese, maybe a granola, maybe a specialty food product. And it's really telling the story of Vermont and our wonderful producers. Whether it's maple, whether it's jams or jellies, whether it's cheese, dairy. And it's a significant show. The agency is supporting a number of these small to mid-size, medium companies to go there. And we're excited that the Vermont Pavilion will be again at the Summer Fancy Food Show in New York City for, I think it's 3 days they're down there.
Great. And off the top of your head, can you think of any companies specifically that have made an appearance at events like that?
Yeah, there's one that has consistently, and I think they won a gold award this year, is Blake Hill Preserves out of the Upper Valley. Joining us will be Cabot, and Grafton Cheese will be with us as well. We have a number of maple producers, and there are also Vermont companies that have their own booth there. But we're gathering a whole bunch of folks under the umbrella of Vermont. So when you walk down the show, it's gonna scream Vermont, and Vermont has a good story to tell. We're not the biggest producers in the world, but our focus has to be on quality and how we produce our wonderful products.
Great. And before we wrap up here, the Agency of Agriculture has decided to wage a war of sorts on invasive species, and that means including some new ones maybe on a list to keep an eye out for. Do you mind quickly telling us what's on there?
Yeah, the agency has a plant division, and it's really important. We are such a mobile society now, so like us, we can be in another country in a matter of hours, and plants are now moving back and forth. Some of those plants are not native to here and probably shouldn't be with us because they can choke out other things. So if I've got time, I'm going to read some of the ones we have. I think there's 8 of them.
Sure.
That we want to keep our eye on, and they are the kudzu, the mile-a-minute. These are incredible names. Mile-a-minute, Japanese stiltgrass, porcelain berry, wineberry, water wheel, water hyacinth, and water soldier. And these are not native to Vermont, and they could present an economic threat or a danger to some of our native plants. So it's important if you're gardening, if you're putting something in, if you're going to a nursery, just keep an eye on some of these plants that we're trying to keep away from us here so they don't choke out other things. And this has been a collaboration with also with the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, and the Agency of Natural Resources.
Sure, something to get ahead of before it's a problem.
Absolutely. There's so much out there that is coming and going now, and it's a mobile society, and that includes plants.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet.
And to learn more about any of the topics we've brought up on today's program, visit the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets at their website. The address is on the screen. That takes care of Across the Fence for today. My thanks to everyone working behind the scenes here at WCAX who make this program possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.